Gunfire shredded the hallway walls, forcing Marcus to dive behind a concrete pillar. Bullets chipped chunks of cement, each shot a deadly reminder that survival depended on quick decisions. Heart pounding, Marcus knew it was now or never. Gathering his breath, he spun out from cover, precision shots dropping two cartel soldiers mid-stride. But from the swirling dust emerged Nicolas Delgado himself, calm, ruthless, a predator at ease amid the chaos. "You can't hide her forever, Donovan," Delgado called out, his voice echoing dangerously. But before Delgado could take another step, a fierce volley forced him back. Mariana emerged from behind, rifle trained confidently, eyes blazing with fury. "You've corrupted justice long enough, Delgado," Mariana declared, stepping beside Marcus. "Today, your power ends." Marcus glanced at Mariana, knowing together they stood for justice, not revenge. Are heroes like Marcus and Mariana enough to end a cartel's reign of terror? Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to follow their thrilling fight for justice. You won't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Donovan had never intended to spend his post-military career walking the corridors of a detention center in El Vado, Texas. Yet there he was on a warm spring morning, standing on the front steps of the Rio Seguro detention facility, a place that processed and housed thousands of migrants awaiting hearings. From the outside, Rio Seguro looked like any other sprawl of concrete buildings behind chain-link fences. Inside its walls, however, Marcus sensed an undercurrent of tension that went beyond immigration disputes or bureaucratic paperwork. He felt it in the way certain guards nodded to each other in hushed acknowledgement, and in how some detainees seemed more alert than frightened. For Marcus, who had spent 27 years in a clandestine world of counterterrorism missions, the signs were not merely coincidences, they were warnings. Marcus's phone buzzed, interrupting his habit of scanning every face and corner. "Donovan here," he answered, expecting a typical administrative call. Instead, the familiar, gravelly voice of Colonel Briggs, the officer who had once commanded him in the darkest corners of Afghanistan, greeted him. "Captain Donovan," Briggs said, using the rank Marcus had held in his operational days. "It's been a while." Marcus's posture stiffened. "Colonel," he replied tersely. "Didn't think I'd hear from you after I left the service." "Circumstances change," Briggs said, his tone brisk. "We've received intel that the Zamora cartel might be targeting your facility. Ever heard of them?" Marcus knew the name too well. The Zamora cartel had been making the news for brutal hits along the border, rumored to have international connections in high places. "Can't see why they'd bother with a detention center," he said, watching as a guard ushered a small group of detainees across the yard. "Most of these folks is just waiting for a hearing." "That's what they want you to believe," the colonel replied. "We've got reason to think they're after a high-value detainee hidden among the general population. We're reassigning you as head of security, effective immediately. Expect a specialized team to show up soon. They'll be under your command." The news rattled Marcus, though outwardly he only paused for a fraction of a second. As he ended the call, old reflexes kicked in. His eyes scanned every entrance, every guard tower, every perimeter post. For nearly 3 years, he'd served here as a security consultant, hired mostly for his resume. He had never pressed the facility management to implement his thorough suggestions for upgrading defenses, partly because he believed he'd left the life of high-stakes missions behind. He wasn't naive, however. He knew that when people like Colonel Briggs stepped into the picture, something serious was brewing. Before heading inside, Marcus glanced at the horizon. 1,000 days had passed since he'd last been in a firefight. So many days since he'd tried to bury what had happened in his final tour. The memory of that last bloody mission in Kandahar sometimes invaded his dreams. But here in the desert heat of Texas, the ghost felt surprisingly distant. If the Zamora cartel had truly set its sights on Rio Seguro, then the quiet life Marcus had carved out would be over. He slipped his phone into his pocket, mentally preparing himself for what was coming. He walked through the facility's gates, aware that this place, meant to be a temporary holding space for ordinary migrants, was about to become a battleground. And he, with decades of clandestine warfare etched into his muscle memory, would be right at the center of it once more. Inside the administration building, Marcus was greeted by Kay Miller, the newly appointed facility director. She was a trim, businesslike woman in her early 40s who ushered him down a corridor of bland walls and flickering fluorescent lights. Her anxious expression told him she had heard something about his sudden promotion, though perhaps not the full story. Mr. Donovan, she said, leading him into an office labeled Security Operations. I was told to give you unrestricted authority over all security matters, but no one told me why. Are we expecting trouble? Marcus scrutinized the room. It was well equipped with monitors, a digital map of the compound, and a bank of consoles that presumably controlled doors, alarms, and cameras. Yet something about it felt neglected, as if it had all the trappings of security without the robust protocols to back it up. Let's just say we have reason to believe the facility might be a target, Marcus replied. I don't have all the details, but we need to shore up defenses fast. Kay frowned. The Department of Homeland Security's been under pressure about conditions here. We're expecting a congressional delegation tomorrow, along with media. Whatever changes you implement, do it quietly. The last thing we need is public alarm. Marcus suppressed a sigh. Politics. He understood that Kay was simply doing her job, but the Zamora cartel wouldn't care about optics or media coverage when they stormed the gates. Still, he nodded. Understood. We can't cancel the visit? Not without raising suspicions, she said grimly. You'll just have to ensure nothing happens to embarrass DHS, or endanger these visitors, for that matter. She handed him a file of current security protocols. He could tell from a glance that many measures he'd recommended before, like adding more robust fencing and updating camera tech, had been ignored or underfunded. We'll need to adjust a few things immediately, he said, placing the file on a console. I'm taking a walk along the perimeter. I'll meet you back here at 3 for a full debrief. Kay gave him a reluctant nod and pressed a security card into his hand. Access to restricted areas. Use it well. As Marcus stepped out into the scorching sun, he pulled out his phone to make a call he'd hoped he'd never have to make again. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Carlos Ramirez. Carlos, it's Donovan, Marcus said, shading his eyes as he walked along a stretch of fence. Still working Border Patrol intelligence? Yeah, though it's more paperwork than field ops these days, Carlos replied. What's going on? Marcus glanced around to make sure no guards were within earshot. I need intel on the Zamora cartel, specifically any unusual movement near El Vado in the past few weeks. Carlos paused. It's not a secure line. I know, Marcus said. Meet me at Elysia's Cafe at 1400 hours. I'll explain. He ended the call, tucking his phone away as he ran a hand along the chain-link fence that served as the facility's outer barrier. The top was laced with razor wire, but he saw areas where cameras had blind spots, places a well-trained infiltration team could exploit. Another sign that the days of relative peace here were numbered. However unremarkable Rio Seguro had appeared that morning, Marcus now sensed a silent countdown had begun. The Zamora cartel didn't launch operations lightly. They planned carefully, using infiltration, sabotage, and brute force when necessary. If the detainee they sought truly threatened their empire, the cartel would stop at nothing to extract or eliminate that target. And Marcus Donovan, a man who had once specialized in clandestine warfare, was now all that stood between these walls and the most ruthless criminals the border had ever seen. By late afternoon, Marcus had already identified multiple vulnerabilities in the perimeter, noted gaps in the camera coverage, and pinpointed areas where guards followed overly predictable patrols. He left urgent directives for immediate improvements with the on-duty supervisor and made his way to Alicia's Cafe to meet Carlos Ramirez. The small eatery located near the border checkpoint smelled of black coffee and grilled tortillas. Local ranchers and off-duty law enforcement frequented the place, blending into a mosaic of dusty boots and hats. Carlos sat in a corner booth fiddling with a disposable phone. He stood up when Marcus approached, his familiar stocky frame and worn features reflecting years of Border Patrol stress. They exchanged a quick, subdued greeting before sliding into the booth. You look like hell, Carlos remarked, signifying his brand of friendly concern. Marcus folded his hands on the table. I feel like it too. Listen, we've got a potential infiltration. Word is, the Zamora cartel is aiming to hit Rio Seguro. Carlos's eyes narrowed. That's a bold move. Cartels don't usually launch large-scale assaults on U.S. soil unless they have a damn good reason. Marcus nodded. They're after a high-value detainee who can apparently dismantle their entire operation with testimony. I need to know if you've seen anything unusual, especially in the last month. Any groups of military-aged men crossing with more gear than usual? Leaning back, Carlos rubbed his jaw. We've intercepted at least one group that looks suspicious. well-armed, traveling in small cells, and no drug shipments in sight. Also, I heard rumor that Nicolas Delgado, the cartel's top boss, may have crossed into Texas. It's unconfirmed, but the chatter's there. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Delgado was known not just for his cruelty, but also for strategic cunning. If Delgado's here, it means they're not just sending foot soldiers. He probably has a special forces background in his pocket. Mercenaries, ex-military. That detainee must be worth a fortune to them. Carlos nodded grimly. They'll fight like professionals. And if Delgado is in town, he's not alone. I'm guessing at least 30 men, heavily armed. Maybe more. Marcus stared into his lukewarm coffee. We got maybe a handful of staff at Rio Seguro who can handle themselves in a crisis, plus a skeleton crew overnight. The rest are just underpaid guards, caught in a potential crossfire. Carlos slid the disposable phone across the table. It's a burner with my direct line. Call me for backup if you need it. But be aware the cartel's infiltration extends pretty deep. I can't promise the cavalry will come in time. Marcus took the phone and slipped it into his pocket. Thanks. Appreciate it. Outside, the afternoon sun glared down on the dusty street. Before parting, Carlos added one more piece of intel. Heard talk about an abandoned ranch on the outskirts. Vehicles coming and going at odd hours. Might be nothing, but if the cartel is staging, that's a good place to set up. With that, they parted ways, leaving Marcus to contemplate how best to transform an underprepared facility into a fortress. His mind spun through new ideas for barricades, camera upgrades, and staff reassignments. The Zamora cartel would test every weakness, exploit every gap. Marcus had until nightfall, maybe a day at best, before the next stage of this plot began. Marcus returned to Rio Seguro in time to review files that Colonel Briggs had promised to send. He settled into a cramped office, opened his secure laptop, and found exactly what he feared. 6 personnel dossiers, each belonging to a former special operator. They were the kind of people who'd been shaped by the same crucible that had forged him. War zones stretching from Iraq to undisclosed operations across multiple continents. The first folder detailed Tomas Alvarez, a Navy SEAL veteran who specialized in close-quarters combat and maritime interdiction. 4 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and rumored side missions in regions no official record would acknowledge. Next came Linda Wu, formerly Army Intelligence, an expert in signals interception and electronic surveillance fluent in multiple languages. Then Samuel Sam Price, known as Doc, who had served as a Special Forces medic with advanced trauma care skills. The list continued with Jordan Ellis, a Green Beret demolitions expert, and finally Mariana Vega, a former undercover DEA agent who had infiltrated major drug cartels on both sides of the border. Of them all, Mariana's file stood out. She had a direct connection to the Zamora cartel, noted as personal involvement, but with details heavily redacted. Marcus frowned at that. An agent with deep cover experience would be an asset, yet also a potential liability if old vendettas lingered. At the bottom was a short file referencing one detainee, Natalia Cruz. The file stated she was under a false name in the general population, her identity sealed for protection. She was the key witness in a federal case against the Zamora cartel. Her testimony could unravel Delgado's empire. Marcus felt a surge of cold anger. The name Zamora cartel dredged up memories he tried to keep buried. Not the same group that had inflicted the ultimate loss on him, but close in flavor and cruelty. Several years ago, he'd lost family to cartel violence in Mexico, an unspeakable moment that had shattered his personal life. While it wasn't confirmed whether the Zamora cartel was responsible, all the cartels operated with a similar brand of brutality, forging a personal sense of duty in him he could never fully retire from. He shut the laptop with a sense of grim purpose. By day's end, a team of 6 elite operators would arrive, under orders to integrate seamlessly into Rio Seguro's staff. But they wouldn't be in uniform, and only a few people would know who they truly were. Officially, they were consultants hired by the Department of Homeland Security. Unofficially, they were the last line of defense against a cartel that did not hesitate to kill, bribe, or blackmail its way toward its target. An hour later, the package arrived, nondescript crates with specialized gear, tactical armor, advanced comms, surveillance drones, high-grade medical supplies, breaching tools, and enough ammunition to outfit a small army. Marcus supervised their placement in a secure storage room, each item reinforcing a somber truth. They weren't just bolstering security for a detention center. They were preparing for an actual battle. The sun was setting by the time he stepped back outside. The desert sky burned with colors that often drew tourists, but Marcus had no time for beauty. Night would fall soon, bringing new shadows in which the Zamora cartel's hitmen could maneuver. Marcus felt the stirring of an old self he thought he had left on foreign battlefields. And if the cartel truly intended to strike, they'd discover that some men never forget how to fight. By 1900 hours, two unmarked SUVs pulled up at the main gate. Marcus watched from the security office's monitors as a group of 5 individuals stepped out and moved with a synchronicity that reminded him of wolves. Economical movements, scanning every angle. He met them in a side conference room. No salutes, no formalities, just a quick exchange of nods that signaled mutual respect. Tomas Alvarez spoke first, introducing himself with the clipped tones of a man who'd seen too many firefights. Navy SEAL, weapons specialist, he said, offering a firm handshake. Next, Linda Wu, tall, athletic, dark hair pulled back, mentioned her background in Army intelligence and electronic surveillance. Sam Price, or Doc, was older, with steady eyes that had clearly witnessed more field surgeries than he'd care to recount. Jordan Ellis nodded once, stating he was demolitions and perimeter defense. Finally, Mariana Vega, whose posture and gaze spoke of either deep secrecy or simmering resentment. Maybe both. I've read your files, Marcus said. I won't pretend I know all your scars, but we're here for one reason. The Zamora cartel is planning a full-scale incursion to grab or kill a single detainee named Natalia Cruz. We need to identify and neutralize any cartel infiltration, secure her location, and prepare for an attack that could come within hours. The group exchanged glances. Thomas Alvarez asked, "Timeline?" "Intelligence suggests soon, next day or two," Marcus replied. "But we can't rule out tonight." Mariana Vega stepped forward, her expression revealing nothing. Natalia Cruz used to have close ties to Nicolas Delgado. She was his accountant and mistress, but she flipped when she saw the blood he was spilling. She knows the cartel's entire financial pipeline. Delgado wants her silenced. Yesterday, if possible. Marcus noted the flicker of urgency in her voice. "So, you've crossed paths before?" Mariana nodded. "Delgado's empire spans everything from drugs to corrupt real estate deals. I went undercover, nearly lost my life twice before the DEA pulled me out. Delgado doesn't forgive betrayal." They spent the next hour coordinating tasks. Tomas and Jordan would assess perimeter security and rig early warning devices. Linda would overhaul the facility's electronic systems, trying to weed out any sabotage. Doc would stock the infirmary with advanced medical kits from their supply. Mariana and Marcus would locate Natalia Cruz, isolate her from the general population, and watch for any sign of a mole. Before dispersing, Marcus reminded them of the stakes. "We're outnumbered. Our advantage is that they don't expect us to be prepared. They think this is a regular detention center guarded by half-trained staff. They have no idea we're all former special ops, and we intend to keep it that way as long as possible." The team moved swiftly, each member falling back into that old operational rhythm. Gear was prepped, vantage points identified, and emergency communications established on encrypted channels. Meanwhile, night draped over the desert. One by one, the corridor lights flickered on, casting elongated shadows against concrete walls. Marcus and Mariana made their way to the women's wing to find Natalia. On a standard roster, she was just another detainee, given a fake name, Rosa Herrera. Mariana explained that Natalia was housed there to blend into the crowd, a concealment method that worked only as long as no one from the cartel recognized her. As they walked, a certain tension crackled in the air. Every distant sound made Marcus reach instinctively for the sidearm holstered under his jacket. He had hoped to leave that reflex behind when he left Delta Force. But old habits, like old scars, never truly vanish. Natalia Cruz turned out to be a slender woman in her late 20s, with tired eyes and a perpetual hunch to her shoulders that suggested she'd long since braced herself for bad news. When Marcus and Mariana first approached her in the women's wing, she looked ready to run, even though there was nowhere to go. Most of the other detainees, dozens of them, were either milling around in the communal area or resting in cramped cells. Under her alias Rosa Herrera, Natalia was supposed to blend in among them, but the tension in her posture was palpable. Mariana spoke first, her voice low yet firm. Natalia, it's me. Mariana Vega. You're safe with us, but we have to move quickly. For a moment, Natalia's face lit with recognition, but the spark of relief quickly mutated into alarm. She glanced around as if expecting Delgado's assassins to spring from behind the gray walls. If you're here, she whispered, he must know where I am. He'll come for me. Mariana gave a succinct nod. He's already on U.S. soil, or so we believe. We need to get you to a secure part of this facility before anyone else realizes who you really are. Marcus observed the pair. He could almost see the shared history in the way Natalia and Mariana looked at each other, like two people who had once been caught in the same dangerous web. He wondered how many close calls Mariana had survived while undercover, and how many of those close calls Natalia had witnessed firsthand. Stay close, Marcus said to Natalia. He led the women down a narrow corridor that fed into a side stairwell, away from the usual route detainees took to medical checks or cafeteria lines. The overhead fluorescents buzzed, casting a sickly yellow tint. In his earbud, Marcus heard Linda Wu's voice giving updates from the newly configured surveillance hub. Marcus, I've just patched the cameras in the women's wing, Linda reported. No signs of suspicious activity yet, but keep moving. I've got 2 staff members who don't match their own shift schedules. Could be nothing. Could be that someone's forging ID data. I'll keep digging. He muttered a quiet copy and pressed forward. Natalia clung to Mariana's side, trying to appear calm but clearly rattled. If Delgado had truly sent an infiltration team, they'd be after more than just her physical location. They'd also try to corrupt facility systems, cut off power, or sabotage security locks. Marcus mentally added those scenarios to a running list of threats. At the bottom of the stairwell, they arrived at a secure corridor leading to an administrative annex rarely used at night. Marcus had already arranged for a small office there to serve as a temporary safe room, guarded by Doc or Jordan Ellis if needed. The building's architecture, originally designed more for bureaucratic convenience than high-level defense, offered pockets of hidden space that a determined strategist could repurpose. They slid Natalia into a windowless office that contained only a table, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. A single overhead lamp buzzed. There, Doc stood guard, his calm presence immediately reassuring. I've got trauma kits and enough med supplies if this goes sideways, he told Marcus, his voice level. Let's hope we don't need them. Mariana guided Natalia into a chair. We'll get you water, food, whatever you need, but you have to stay here. If the cartel has an inside man, this is our best bet to keep you off their radar. Natalia exhaled shakily, folding her hands on the table. This can't be happening again, she murmured, eyes distant. I thought once I made it to the U.S., it would be over. Marcus bent down to meet her gaze. We're going to make sure it ends here, he said firmly, but you have to trust us. Leaving Doc to watch over Natalia, Marcus and Mariana made their way back to the security hub, where Linda Wu's fingers were a blur across multiple keyboards. The monitors displayed feeds from nearly every corner of Rio Seguro, the gates, the fences, the main corridors, the cafeteria, and the administrative wings. There was even a thermal feed from newly installed motion sensors around the perimeter, courtesy of Jordan Ellis and Thomas Alvarez. Linda glanced up, her expression tense. I confirmed one suspicious staff member, a guard named Rafael Flores, hired 6 months ago. His references check out, but his patrol routes keep intersecting with key areas, like he's mapping them. I've also got half a dozen cameras going offline in rotation, like a pattern. If someone is testing our blind spots, they're doing a pretty thorough job. Marcus clenched his jaw. We need to figure out who else might be in on this. The Zamora cartel won't rely on just one inside man. Mariana crossed her arms, pacing. Cartels typically plant multiple people, each with a small role, so no single traitor has the entire picture. Could be a few guards, maybe an admin staffer with access to personnel files, someone who can open gates on short notice. That's where I come in, Linda said, pulling up lines of code on a separate monitor. I'm setting up an internal network monitor. Any unauthorized transmissions, weird data spikes, or attempts to access sealed files, I'll know about it. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Tomas. Perimeter set, Jordan placing sensors along south fence. Minimal guard presence on that side. Let's fix that. Marcus nodded, replying with a quick directive to reassign 2 trustworthy guards to the south fence. He wanted human eyes in addition to the sensors. Turning back to Linda, he asked, "How soon can you lock down the entire facility if needed?" "Give me 5 minutes to finalize the scripts," she replied, tapping keys. "I can seal doors, disable certain gates, and even shut down remote access if we suspect an electronic breach." Mariana exhaled. Time might be the thing we don't have. Delgado isn't known for patience. If he thinks his target is about to slip away, he'll attack sooner rather than later. Marcus studied the map display overhead. The facility resembled a giant rectangle, subdivided into multiple wings. Detainees were mostly in the north wing, the women's section was in the east, and admin offices made up the west side. The staff entrances and vehicle bays sat on the south end, which connected to an external utility yard. If they storm the place, they'll come from the south or east, he reasoned. Likely the south because it's more secluded. We've got that side covered now, but it's still the weakest link. Linda's phone pinged. She glanced at a flashing alert on her screen. Unidentified signals from inside the facility. Low frequency, possibly short-range transmissions. Could be radio comms that don't match official channels. Mariana and Marcus exchanged looks. That meant someone could be relaying intel, guard schedules, camera blind spots, or even Natalia's whereabouts. They had to move fast. Marcus signaled to Mariana. "Find Tomas and Jordan. Sweep the building. Detain the guard Linda flagged and any other suspicious personnel. Quietly. We don't want to panic." Mariana gave a determined nod. "On it." She paused, looking at Marcus as if considering whether to add something. In the end, she simply said, "Be careful," before stepping out into the hallway at a brisk pace. Linda continued her barrage of keystrokes, lines of code scrolling rapidly. "I'll do what I can from here, but don't wait too long to lock this place down if it comes to that." Marcus pulled up a separate screen, reviewing the status of local law enforcement. He had already contacted Carlos Ramirez from Border Patrol Intelligence, who promised to be on standby with a small team, but they weren't exactly next door, and local corruption might slow any official backup. "We'll keep the upper hand," Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to Linda. They picked the wrong day and the wrong place. Meanwhile, out on the sparsely lit edges of the compound, Tomas Alvarez crouched behind a stack of shipping pallets near the south fence. Through his night vision goggles, he watched Jordan Ellis methodically installing small sensor units on the fence line. Each unit would detect vibrations from wire-cutting attempts or climbing activity. They'd also set up a tripwire alarm a few yards further out, concealed by dusty scrub brush and low cacti. Jordan moved with the careful efficiency of a demolitions expert. Every placement was just so, giving maximum coverage while avoiding easy detection. Once finished, he double-checked the signal on his handheld device. "Sensors are live," he whispered. "Any movement from beyond the fence triggers a silent alarm in the security hub." Tomas nodded, scanning the open terrain. Under the moonlight, he could make out the faint silhouette of desert shrubs, the distant glare of highway lights, and the endless stretch of star-dotted skies. The dryness of the air clung to his throat. "We're spread thin," he remarked. "A few sensors and cameras won't stop a determined cartel team." Jordan tapped the side of his head, indicating the earpiece. "We're not supposed to stop them alone. We slow them down, pick them off, and fall back to interior defenses. Marcus and Mariana have plans to keep Natalia safe, but we need to be sure no one cuts the power or kills the lights before we can respond." The memory of past missions in the Middle East flickered through Thomas's mind. Quick strikes by hostile forces, sophisticated infiltration tactics, booby traps in unexpected places. At least here they had the advantage of a defensive posture, provided they kept the element of surprise. Suddenly, Jordan's sensor device beeped softly. A faint, flickering line scrolled across its tiny screen. "Might just be a stray coyote," Jordan muttered, but Tomas could tell he wasn't convinced. They peered through the chain link, scanning the desert. A single figure emerged from behind a scrub bush, walking carefully along the perimeter as if searching for something. The intruder wore dark clothing and held what looked like a tool bag, possibly bolt cutters or electronic gear. Thomas keyed his mic. "Alvarez to security hub. We've got contact on the south fence, possible infiltration. One individual, no visible backup." Linda's voice came back, controlled. Acknowledged. Cameras confirm one person. No other signatures in range. Proceed with caution. Tomas motioned for Jordan to circle wide. They moved like synchronized hunters. Tomas creeping closer to intercept from behind while Jordan kept his rifle trained on the intruder. The man fiddled with a small device that looked like a phone or radio, occasionally pointing it toward the fence as though measuring signals. Taking advantage of the near silence, Tomas closed the gap. At the last second, the intruder must have sensed movement because he spun around, dropping his bag and reaching inside his jacket. But Tomas was faster. He tackled the man to the ground, driving a knee into his back to pin him. Jordan arrived a moment later, weapon raised. "Don't move," Tomas growled. "Hands out where I can see them." The intruder let out a string of curses in Spanish, writhing under Tomas's grip. In the dim moonlight, Tomas spotted a small pistol on the ground, knocked loose during the struggle. Jordan towed it away. "Who sent you?" Tomas demanded. "You got a name?" The man gritted his teeth and said nothing, but a tattoo on the side of his neck gave him away. A stylized Z, one of the markings used by the Zamora cartel. Tomas glanced at Jordan, who simply nodded. No big surprise there. "Alvarez to Marcus," Tomas said into his mic. "We've got a live one here. Zamora foot soldier by the looks of it." "Good work," Marcus replied through the earpiece. "Secure him. We'll need to find out if he's alone." Back in the depths of the facility, Mariana Vega moved with silent urgency. First, she located guard Rafael Flores, one of the suspicious staffers Linda had flagged, and found him pacing a hallway near the facility's HVAC controls. Maybe he was just doing a routine check, but Mariana wasn't taking chances. She followed at a distance, pressing her back against the wall whenever he paused. Linda's earlier intel suggested Flores's shift logs didn't match up, meaning he might be slipping around to places he shouldn't be. If he truly was the cartel's inside man, he could be trying to disable climate systems or reroute power. She watched as Flores paused by a fuse box, lifted a small ring of keys, and tested one. That was enough for Mariana. She stepped from the shadows, her sidearm drawn but angled low. "Freeze, Flores. Put the keys down." Flores jumped, dropping the key ring with a jangling clatter. What is this?" he stammered, trying to sound indignant, but fear bled into his voice. "Routine security check," Mariana replied coolly. "We got word someone's been tampering with systems." Sweat beaded on Flores's brow. I was told to check these. Orders from Director Miller." Mariana shook her head. Kay Miller didn't sign off on any after-hours HVAC inspections. "Hands behind your head." Slowly. He looked ready to bolt, but she moved quickly, grabbing his wrist and twisting it behind him. Flores let out a yelp. In one smooth motion, she retrieved a pair of zip ties from her belt and cinched his wrists together. "We'll have a chat about who you really work for," she said, her tone icy. Before she could radio in, her earpiece crackled with Marcus's voice. "Mariana's status?" She clicked her mic. "Got Flores under wraps. He was messing with the HVAC fuse box, sending him to a secure holding room." "Good. Alvarez and Jordan just caught a cartel scout on the south fence. I need you to check on Natalia. Doc says she's calm, but worried. She keeps asking if Delgado's people are already inside." Mariana felt a pang of sympathy. Natalia had risked everything to escape Delgado's control, and here she was again, caged by the fear of his reach. "Heading there now, over." She dragged Flores along to a utility closet she knew had a lockable door. Once inside, she forced him to sit against a pipe and secured his ankles with more zip ties. "We'll be back for you," she murmured. Flores spat an insult in Spanish, but his bravado didn't match the terror in his eyes. Mariana closed the door, heart pounding with adrenaline. She had no illusions that this was the only inside man. The Zamora cartel could have multiple operatives, each with a narrow job. A saboteur for the power, a mole for the schedules, maybe even a guard in the women's wing who could identify Natalia. As she hurried toward the makeshift safe room, part of her felt the old thrill of an undercover operation. But unlike her previous missions, this time she wasn't alone in the dark. She had a team, a real one, led by a man who understood exactly how high the stakes could go. Delgado thought he was unstoppable, but Mariana was sure he'd never faced a defense quite like this. High above the desert, dawn teased the horizon with a pale glow. Inside the Rio Seguro detention facility, however, the fatigue of a long night's vigilance weighed heavily on everyone. Marcus Donovan stood in the security hub, watching Linda Wu shuffle through live camera feeds. The monitors displayed a jigsaw puzzle of corridors, holding cells, and perimeter fence lines. Despite the tension, the facility looked deceptively calm. Mariana's voice crackled over the comm system. Marcus, I'm with Natalia. Doc says her vitals are fine, but she's showing signs of extreme stress. Wants to know when this will be over. Marcus pressed a hand to his forehead. The question was one he couldn't answer with certainty. They'd already caught one scout outside the south fence and had a suspected inside man zip-tied in a closet. Yet the threat of a larger assault by the Zamora cartel still loomed. We keep her safe no matter what. Has she slept? She dozed off for maybe 10 minutes, Mariana replied, but every noise wakes her up. As if on cue, the door to the security hub opened, admitting Kay Miller, the facility director. She looked frazzled, her hair haphazardly pinned back, the lines under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept either. Mr. Donovan, she said tersely, I've just learned we have a congressional delegation arriving in a few hours, with media in tow. That was arranged weeks ago, but it's obviously, though, inconvenient timing. What exactly is going on? Marcus briefly considered whether to reveal everything. Ultimately, she was the official in charge. We have credible intel that a major cartel operation is inbound. They're trying to either abduct or kill one of the detainees who's a key witness against them. Kay's jaw tightened. And you couldn't tell me this sooner? I had to keep operational details under wraps, Marcus explained. We've already intercepted one armed scout and detained a suspicious staffer. We have a crisis contained, but it's not over. Linda swiveled her chair around. Director, with the media coming, the cartel might view that as a deadline. They'll want to strike before the facility is crawling with cameras and politicians. We're guessing they'll hit us sooner rather than later. Kay let out a ragged breath. I'll try to postpone the visit, but that may not be possible without raising questions. And if we have a shooting war here when they arrive, that's a nightmare for everyone. She paused, eyes narrowing at Marcus. What's your plan exactly? Marcus ran a hand through his short-cropped hair. We'll maintain heightened security around the detainee. My team is working to identify any additional moles. We've placed sensor units and cameras around the perimeter. The moment we detect a large group approaching, we'll lock the facility down. I can't guarantee zero gunfire, but we'll do everything we can to contain it. Fine, Kay said, though her expression betrayed her anxiety. Just keep me in the loop. If word of an armed cartel assault leaks to the media, we'll have a full-blown scandal and possibly a public panic. Marcus folded his arms. My priority is saving lives, Director, not preserving public image. She met his gaze, a flicker of respect in her eyes. I understand that, but part of my job is dealing with political fallout. Let's both do what we must. When she left, Marcus sighed inwardly. Dealing with cartels was simpler than dealing with bureaucracy. Linda busied herself checking data logs, the screen filled with lines of text scrolling as she monitored possible infiltration attempts on the facility's network. The night's tension had not abated. It had merely shifted into a precarious dawn watch. Just then, the phone rang on the console, the landline typically used for official calls. Marcus answered. A voice he didn't recognize came through, calm and unhurried, its Spanish accent laden with confidence. Good morning, Mr. Donovan. My name is Nicholas Delgado. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his gut. How did you get this number? Delgado chuckled. We have ways, amigo. I'm calling because we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Hand over Natalia Cruz, and no one else needs to die. Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. You're making a mistake if you think you can waltz in here. Oh, I don't need to waltz, Delgado said. I have men in place and more on standby. Consider this your warning. If I don't have her in my custody by midday, I'll show you what a real crisis looks like. Without waiting for a response, Delgado ended the call, leaving Marcus standing there with the dial tone echoing in his ear. Somewhere along the southern approach to Rio Seguro, two black SUVs rumbled down a dusty back road. Within them sat over a dozen of Delgado's enforcers, all outfitted with tactical gear. Ballistic vests, modern assault rifles, sidearms, and communications headsets. Their eyes gleamed with anticipation. It wasn't every day that they attempted a direct assault on a U.S. federal facility. Inside the lead SUV, Delgado himself sat, flanked by his lieutenant, a wiry, sharp-eyed man called Esteban. Delgado's leg jostled restlessly, a sign of impatience. Despite his confident phone call to Marcus, he knew time was running short. The upcoming congressional visit meant additional law enforcement presence. If he waited too long, the entire area would be swarming with federal agents. This Donovan, Delgado said, rubbing the scar on his chin. Ex-Delta Force, I'm told. He could be trouble. Esteban shrugged. We have numbers on our side, and if there's still at least one insider active, they can sabotage power or open certain gates. Delgado nodded but didn't look reassured. He had built his empire by never underestimating opponents. His network of corrupt officials, assassins, and traffickers spanned multiple countries. Yet Natalia Cruz threatened to unravel it all with a single sworn testimony. She knew where every account was kept, every shell corporation registered, and who in the government was on the payroll. If her knowledge reached the right ears, Delgado might trade his private jets for a lifetime in a U.S. Supermax prison. We'll approach quietly, Delgado instructed. Scout the perimeter. Confirm the infiltration routes we planned. They've likely upgraded security, but they can't watch everything. Esteban tapped a small tablet on his lap. We have thermal drones on standby. Once our people breach, we'll use them to coordinate movement inside the facility. We'll also jam certain frequencies to hamper their communications. Delgado gazed out the tinted window at the endless desert, remembering a time he had once been just a street kid in Sonora, hustling and scratching for any foothold. He never dreamed he'd grow powerful enough to intimidate high-level officials, let alone challenge a U.S. government building. But here he was about to stake everything on this operation. If he failed, the repercussions would be dire. Esteban's phone buzzed, and he answered with a curt, "See?" After a brief exchange, he turned to Delgado, brow furrowed. The scout we sent last night has gone dark. Our contact inside says the man was apprehended. A tightness coiled in Delgado's stomach. Then they know we're coming. Yes, Esteban replied. But if Donovan's team is small, they can't hold out forever. Delgado exhaled slowly. We'll need a diversion, something that draws their best fighters away from the detainee. Then we move in, isolate her, and get out. If necessary, we destroy the facility's main records and data. No sense leaving evidence behind. He pulled out a satellite phone and dialed a coded number, eyes narrowing. Time to move to Phase 2, he told Esteban. They want a war. Let's give them a taste. And if Donovan insists on playing hero, he can die as one. Behind them, the second SUV maintained close distance, its occupants scanning every rock and shrub for signs of watchers. The convoy pressed on, dust kicking up in a cloudy trail under the rising sun. It wouldn't be long before they arrived at a predetermined staging area. From there, the real assault would begin. Delgado allowed himself a slight, humorless smile. Natalia Cruz had made a grave error in thinking she could escape the consequences of betraying him. By midday, he intended to prove just how far his reach truly extended, even into the heart of Texas. At Rio Seguro's makeshift safe room, Natalia Cruz paced back and forth, ignoring the chair Mariana had offered her. Sleep-deprived and jittery, she kept glancing at Doc, who sat near the door with a small medical bag at his feet. Doc had tried to administer a mild sedative, but Natalia refused it. She wanted to be fully alert, just in case. Mariana stood with her arms folded, leaning against a file cabinet. She had already disarmed guard Flores and left him bound in a locked closet. Yet she suspected there might be others like him, hidden allies of the cartel, waiting for the right moment to strike. Calm down, Natalia, she said, softening her tone. Pacing won't help. Natalia pressed a hand to her temple. I can't just sit still. Delgado, he doesn't leave loose ends. And I'm the biggest loose end of all. I've faced him too, Mariana replied. You're not dealing with him alone this time. We've got a well-trained team, and Marcus knows how to handle men like Delgado. Sinking onto the edge of a desk, Natalia let out a shaky breath. You're so sure we'll come out of this alive. Mariana locked eyes with her. I've seen Donovan operate. He's thorough, and Delgado's arrogance might be his undoing. Nearby, Doc cleared his throat. This isn't just about arrogance. The cartel's lethal, and Delgado's no amateur. But we've done everything we can to fortify. I suggest you try to conserve energy. We might have a long day. He handed Natalia a water bottle. She drank, but her hand trembled. Mariana was struck by how different Natalia was compared to the cartel accountant she'd known during her undercover stint. Back then, Natalia had projected poise, always meticulously dressed, handling ledgers full of illicit funds with icy composure. Now the danger was personal, immediate. The veneer of calm had cracked. Mariana's earpiece crackled. "Vega, it's Marcus. You secure?" She clicked her mic. "Secure enough. How's the perimeter?" "Busy," Marcus replied. "Tomas and Jordan found footprints suggesting more cartel scouts. We've also got unusual vehicle activity on a nearby road. I suspect Delgado's staging a team. Stand by for a possible lockdown order." Mariana relayed the update to Doc and Natalia, whose eyes went wide. "Lockdown?" Natalia murmured. "It means we seal off non-essential parts of the facility," Doc explained. "No one gets in or out without going through multiple checkpoints. Cameras, doors, and gates are under strict control." Mariana checked her weapons magazine. "We'll hold here if they breach. Marcus wants us in place to protect you." She glanced at Doc. "You handle the medical side. I'll handle the lead." The tension in the small room thickened. Even Doc, who'd treated bullet wounds in war zones, seemed keyed up, his shoulders tight, voice quieter than usual. Natalia closed her eyes briefly, perhaps trying to summon inner fortitude. "Thank you," she said, opening them again. I know you're all risking your lives for me. I just want you to know, if I have to testify tomorrow, I won't hold back. I'll name every corrupt official, every front company." Mariana nodded. "That's why we're here. You finish this." Before Natalia could reply, an alarm blared overhead, short, piercing whoops that reverberated through the corridors. Doc jumped to his feet, grabbing his med bag. Mariana's earpiece erupted with voices. Marcus's tone cut through the noise. "Cartel vehicles spotted 2 miles out. Heading this way, all units prepare for potential assault." "This is not a drill?" "Repeat, this is not a drill." The safe room door trembled slightly with the resonance of the alarm, as though the very building understood what was coming. Outside, armed guards and staff would be scrambling to their stations, likely terrified by the thought of a cartel invasion on American soil. But inside this small office, the air held a quiet resolve. Mariana and Doc exchanged glances, then nodded at each other. "Let's do this," Mariana said, gripping her weapon. Natalia stood in the corner trying to steady her breathing. The storm had finally arrived. Marcus raced through the main corridor, heading to the administrative wing where Kay Miller's office was located. He planned to coordinate the lockdown from that vantage point, ensuring the facility's critical controls remained out of cartel hands. The overhead alarm still echoed, interspersed with recorded directives urging staff to remain calm and proceed to designated safe areas. He spotted Kay Miller just as she emerged from a side corridor, flanked by 2 wide-eyed clerks. "Director Miller," Marcus called, catching her attention. "We're activating a full lockdown. I need you and any non-essential staff to shelter in the second-floor conference room. Understood?" Kay's cheeks were flushed. "I'll do that. But we have a delegation arriving in less than an hour. The gates, they won't be getting in," Marcus interrupted. "Not until we neutralize this threat. Trust me, you do not want visitors wandering into a potential firefight." One of the clerks, a tall man with glasses, swallowed hard. "A firefight, sir?" Marcus fixed him with a steady stare. "Hopefully not, but the cartel is on the move. We're taking no chances. Now go, both of you. Follow the emergency protocols we distributed." Kay nodded, ushering the clerks forward. Once they were gone, Marcus keyed his comm. "Linda, begin the lockdown sequence. Seal non-essential doors, restrict external access, set all gates to emergency lockdown." "Acknowledged," Linda's voice replied. "Starting sequence now. Be advised, perimeter sensors show multiple vehicles stopping outside the southern approach. Thermal scans indicate anywhere from 15 to 20 armed individuals. They're dismounting." Marcus's chest tightened. That was a sizable force, more than the typical squad. "Understood. Where are Tomas and Jordan?" "They're on the rooftop, covering the south side with rifles," Linda said, her tone professional but carrying an undercurrent of strain. "They spotted at least 3 SUVs, and possibly a 4th that's hanging back." Marcus made for the facility's control room, an annex connected to Kay Miller's main office, where Linda had set up her monitoring station. He found her surrounded by screens that flashed with security feeds, digital facility maps, and lines of code streaming by. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and tension lines creased her brow. "Look," she said, pointing to the largest monitor. A live feed from a rooftop camera showed men in tactical gear fanning out across the desert terrain near the south fence. Some were huddled behind the SUVs, presumably organizing gear or finalizing a plan. "Where's Delgado?" Marcus asked, scanning for the man who had so brazenly called him. Linda zoomed in on one of the vehicles. A well-dressed figure stood partially behind the open passenger door, speaking with a lieutenant who gestured toward the facility. Even at a distance, Marcus recognized the posture of authority. "There," Linda confirmed. "He's not hanging back this time. Looks like he's commanding on the ground." Marcus clenched his fists. "Then we target him specifically. Without Delgado's leadership, the rest might fracture." Linda nodded, tapping the keyboard. "Tomas and Jordan are standing by. We'll let them know." He touched his comm set. "Alvarez, Ellis, do you have eyes on Delgado?" Tomas's voice crackled back. "Affirmative. 100 yards out. Good vantage. Waiting on your go." The plan they had hashed out involved letting the cartel make the first aggressive move. Yet seeing them gather in force, minutes away from a probable assault, made it hard to stay patient. Marcus forced himself to think tactically, not emotionally. They had prepared for this scenario: sensors, locked gates, vantage points. They also had the element of surprise in the sense that Delgado still expected to be facing ordinary detention guards, not a cadre of special operators. "They'll probably try to cut power or jam comms," Marcus said to Linda, never taking his eyes off the monitors. "Stay ready to switch to backups. Keep partial power if they sabotage the main lines." Outside, a swirl of dust signaled that the SUVs were repositioning, likely to give the men inside a better staging area. Marcus looked at the array of cameras, noting how they'd sealed the main entrance with heavy gates, but recognized that the facility's chain-link fence was still a potential weak point. Even with razor wire, a dedicated group with bolt cutters could breach it in moments, if not carefully guarded. "Lockdown protocols are 80% complete," Linda reported. "All detainees are restricted to their wings and staff is sheltering. Minimal movement inside now." Marcus inhaled, exhaled slowly. "Then it begins." On the rooftop feed, Delgado raised a hand, and his enforcers started to move. Suddenly, the southern perimeter erupted in chaos. Through the monitors, Marcus saw muzzle flashes from behind the SUVs. Gunfire spat at the facility's fence, likely aimed at cameras or sensors. A moment later, an alarm on Linda's console blared to signify that several sensor units had been destroyed or tampered with. Marcus thumbed his comm. "Alvarez, Ellis, engage. Target their ability to breach the fence." A sharp, controlled burst echoed through the feed's audio pickup. A muzzle flash winked from the rooftop where Tomas and Jordan were stationed. One cartel soldier went down, clutching his shoulder, while the others scrambled for cover. Returning fire crackled in the distance, peppering the rooftop parapet. The specialized equipment in Linda's console showed ballistic impacts. "They've got decent shooters," she muttered, hands flying over the keyboard to switch camera angles. "We need to be careful they don't pin down Tomas and Jordan." Marcus adjusted the earpiece. "Linda, cycle the secondary cameras. Keep me informed on movements near the gates." On screen, a smaller group of cartel enforcers split off, racing along the fence to a spot that was partially shielded by an outbuilding. The chain link rattled as they prepared to cut an entry point. Another beep, louder this time, indicated a communications jam attempt. An icon on Linda's screen flashed to red, showing external signals were being interfered with. "They're jamming us," Linda confirmed, switching to encrypted internal lines only. "I can keep facility channels open, but outside calls are compromised." Marcus silently cursed, but he'd planned for this. They had a fallback system of short-range encrypted radios that the cartel couldn't easily knock out unless they physically captured them. "Notify me if we lose cameras in that sector." Below on the feed, Tomas and Jordan fired in disciplined bursts. One muzzle flashed from the left flank, another from the right, as they rotated to new positions behind the rooftop's low concrete barriers. Two more cartel men fell, one possibly fatally, but the rest pressed on, driven by Delgado's orders or the promise of a massive payoff. In the administrative wing corridor, Kay Miller huddled with a small group of staff, the overhead lights flickering slightly as someone tried to cut external power. Emergency backup generators kicked in. The hum of the transition was audible through the building. Over the facility-wide speakers, a voice repeated lockdown instructions in both English and Spanish, telling detainees to remain calm in their cells. The calm tone contrasted with the staccato bursts of gunfire outside. Marcus bent to the console microphone. "Jordan, they're cutting the fence by that outbuilding. Slow them down. We can't afford them establishing an internal foothold." "On it," Jordan's voice crackled. Another series of shots rang out. The camera feed showed sparks flying off the fence as bullets ricocheted. The enforcers ducked, halting their progress momentarily. But Delgado seemed unfazed. He circled around the back of an SUV, barking commands. Another wave of enforcers emerged, setting up what looked like a portable shield arrangement. Using the shield as cover, they continued snipping through the chain link, ignoring the bullets whizzing overhead. Marcus realized that time was against them. A large portion of the cartel's force was concentrated on the fence line, while the rest might be preparing an alternate breach. "Linda," he called, "any sign of infiltration elsewhere?" Her fingers danced across the keyboard. "I'm picking up movement in the drainage ditch on the east side. Another group, maybe 6 men, creeping in low. They must think we haven't covered that area." Marcus grunted. "We have, but not heavily. Let's not let them know that." He keyed his mic again. "Mariana, you copy?" A faint buzz, then Mariana's voice came through. "Go ahead." "We have tangos in the drainage ditch east side. You're closest. Can you spare a moment from Natalia's security to intercept?" "Doc can hold down the safe room," Mariana replied. "I'll grab a guard or two, see if we can push them back. Make it quick. If they get in from the east, they can flank us." "Copy. Over and out." Marcus switched into a different feed, glimpsing Natalia and Doc in the safe room. Natalia looked pale, but her jaw was set, as if she'd made a final decision to stand her ground. Doc hovered near her, scanning the small hallway outside the door. He had prepared a makeshift barricade and even rigged a few emergency medical carts as cover. Shifting again, Marcus watched as Mariana, accompanied by a female guard he recognized as Officer Reyes, hurried down an auxiliary corridor leading to an exit near the drainage ditch. They each carried rifles, and from their quick, purposeful strides, it was clear they'd both been trained for more than just routine facility duties. Outside, the first wave of cartel enforcers finally succeeded in breaching the fence. A half-dozen men poured through the opening, hugging the walls of an outbuilding for cover. Jordan and Tomas repositioned, firing carefully to avoid wasted shots. The courtyard cameras showed the would-be attackers pinned, but additional cartel members slid in to reinforce them. "They're forming a foothold," Linda warned. "We'll need more manpower out there, or they'll just keep pushing. The door to the utility yard is only 30 yards from that outbuilding." Marcus set his jaw. "Understood. Keep me updated. I'm heading out there." He turned away from the console, but Linda grabbed his arm. "You go out there. You leave the command center. Who coordinates?" He gave her a tight smile. "You can handle it. You've got the code to lock down any section of the building. You're as qualified as any intel officer. I'll do more good putting boots on the ground." She stared at him for half a second, then nodded. "Go, I'll maintain comms with everyone. Don't get yourself killed." Marcus gripped her shoulder briefly, an unspoken thanks, then sprinted out of the room. His mind raced through possible tactics to neutralize the cartel's partial breach. They were professionals, and Delgado was no fool, but Marcus and his team had faced long odds before. The question was whether they could hold long enough for any external reinforcements, if those would even come at all. As the facility's fluorescent lights flickered under the strain of partial power and gunfire reverberated through the corridors, Marcus felt the old adrenaline surging in his veins. This was the life he'd promised himself he wouldn't return to. Yet here he was, back in the thick of it. But there was no time for regret. Natalia Cruz's life and the fates of countless others hung on their actions in the next desperate minutes. As the dust settled, Marcus surveyed the damage. Lives risked, battles fought, but justice preserved. Yet the echo of Delgado's chilling words lingered, leaving questions Marcus knew wouldn't fade easily. Had they truly dismantled the cartel's influence? Or was this merely a victory in a larger, never-ending war? Marcus turned, eyes locked on Natalia Cruz, safe but shaken. Her testimony could still change everything. proving that courage, even against ruthless power, can prevail. But the fight was far from over. What do you think? Is justice strong enough to triumph over corruption? Or will men like Delgado always rise again? Share your thoughts below and join the conversation.